Good morning, YouTube. So today we're going to be installing the 6-position TS Performance chip on my 2003 Ford F350. Okay, to start this, you will need to pop the hood. And you're going to need a few tools. You're going to need an 8mm deep well. You're going to need a 7mm deep well and a 10mm shallow. And obviously a ratchet to go along with them. Okay, so after the hood's released, you come out front, you open it up. You're going to want to disconnect the batteries. I choose to disconnect the negative side of the batteries. This truck is equipped with 2 batteries, so there are 2 terminals you're going to have to disconnect. To disconnect the batteries, you want to take an 8mm deep well socket and loosen up the terminal itself, or loosen up the cable itself. Remove the cable from the terminal and tuck it down away from the battery so that it cannot reconnect under its own pressure. So now you'll come over to battery number 2 and you're going to disconnect its negative side cable as well. Pull it off its terminal and push it down away from the battery also. Okay, so we're now inside of the engine bay on the driver's side of the truck. To the left is the brake booster, and then directly on the firewall itself you'll see a plug-in coming out of the firewall. This is the ECU PCM. It goes by many different names, and it has one 10mm bolt going into the PCM itself. This bolt makes the connection bolt into the PCM. So now what you're going to want to do is loosen the 10mm bolt and pull it out. Once you have the bolt pulled out as far as it'll go, just pull back on the plug and it'll pop right out of the ECU. You see here's the 10mm bolt that bolts into the ECU. Slide it to the side a little bit, and now we'll go inside and take 2 7mm bolts out and pull the ECU out. Okay, so we're now inside the cab of the truck. We are behind the hood latch. The hood latch is up here. This is the parking brake. To kind of give you reference to where we're at, we're on the driver's side, front kick panel of the truck. You see the ratchet releases from the parking brake here. So you have 2 7mm bolts, 1 and 2, and you'll want to take these out. Okay, so now you'll want to pull forward and back, then the ECU will come right out. So with the ECU out, you'll want to slide the ECU out of the tray. You'll pull forward. This is the area that had the 10mm bolt plug, and you'll pull that forward like this. Now the ECU has an X stamped into the frame of the ECU, and you'll want that to face towards the kick panel, towards the outside of the truck when you insert this back in. So TS provides you with a Scotch-Brite pad to sand off the goo off of the pin terminals. I've had Swamps take a look at this ECU already and check and make sure that it's in good working order, and Swamps had to go in and add metal from the previous install of a chip. They sanded too far down on the terminals. If you have copper showing, that's where you stop. You do not want copper to show on your terminals. You still want them to be silver. So the best advice that I can give in this situation is to take some acetone and rub on the terminals here to get the goo itself off. Sanding with the Scotch-Brite pad is kind of just the last step, and you just barely want to do that to get any of the remnants off. You don't want to spend your time with the Scotch-Brite getting all of the goo off. You want to do that chemically. It's a lot easier to do so if you take these 6 5.5mm bolts out and the frame pulls apart, and you can access both sides of the ECU that way. And I'll pull it apart and show you. So with all of the 6 5.5mm bolts out of the casing, you'll pull the X side up, and then you can pull the entire frame up. Now the ECU itself is still screwed down to the frame. You're going to have this clear rubber content terminal protection all the way around this. You don't need any of that off. All you need to do is, this allows you to get better access to the pins, and you can take acetone and wipe the goo off of those pins. I don't really recommend going too crazy with a Scotch-Brite pad. It's just something you want to come in there and touch it up. You don't want to go too crazy. So now let's put it back together. Okay, now for the fun stuff. So we're going to pull the PCM back out of the tray, and so here we have the chip, the 6-position knob. Here's the knob end, or the plug-in end of the knob. You're going to want to take an Allen wrench and insert it into this small little hole that you see here, and turn it counterclockwise, and that will release the pressure of the knob, and the knob will come separated from the position knob. Unscrew the retaining nut, and now you'll take this retaining nut and find a drill bit that slides inside to fit as snug as possible, and you're going to drill a hole in your dash to secure the knob to. Now when you do drill a hole, it's best, in my opinion, if you take a piece of the dash panel that you can remove pretty accessible. You have this detent here on the knob itself, and if you could find a piece of plastic on your dash that you can remove to install the knob on, it's best if you do so. That way you can mark where this detent is, and from the back side drill a small indentation. That way this detent will go will slide into that indentation and not allow the knob to move. So now you just pick a location on your dash to install the knob. Okay, so for better access to install the knob, to get to the back side of this hole, you want to take your fuse panel cover off. If you don't know how to do that, there are 4 little half-turn knobs to pull off. Just stick your fingernail in and turn left, and then the panel will fall right off. There's 2 more over there. Okay, when you find the location that you want on your dash for your hole to be drilled, now you're ready to install the knob. The previous owner of this truck had a knob installed on here, so they have chosen to drill the hole here. Not exactly the best location to use. Like I was saying earlier, there's no way to access the back side of it, so you can put a detent in there. But I'm going to reuse it because this is a temporary dash for me. We're going to be installing the 2008 model dash, so it's just kind of a temporary thing anyways. When installing the knob, you want to make sure that you have the jagged edge washer on the inside of the knob itself when you slide it into the position on the dash or where you're putting the knob. The reason for doing that is so that the knob will grab a little bit better and not move around as much, especially in a situation like mine where I can't get back there and do the detent. So now you'll take the lock nut and tighten it down on the knob. With the knob attached to the dash, you want to take the knob itself, find the detent where the Allen head goes in, and you want to line it up with the flat portion of the knob, and it'll slide right into its position like so. Then you'll go take your Allen head and you'll tighten that Allen bolt down. Now for running the wire the best, cleanest way possible that you can to get to the front side of the PCM cage. So for me, I'm going to run the wire behind the fuse box itself and then come down here on the opposite side of the parking brake and pull it through. Okay, so with the PCM prepped and ready to accept the TS chip, you have the TS chip and the plug attached to one another, and you'll want to take the chip and slide it. You want to find out which side is the left side and which side is the right side of your cage. This is the left side with the bolt portions closest to the wall itself. This is the driver's side of the truck. So you'll take this open area here, you'll slide the chip in this direction as if you were sliding it through the firewall. And then so now you're ready to install this chip into the PCM. So the PCM has two sides to the computer panel itself on the inside. You'll have a side that has more gap and a side that has a lesser gap. So the side that has the more gap is the side you're going to be installing the chip on. So the side where the plug on the chip is attached to will be the side that goes on the larger gaps section. So take your time, slide the chip in slowly so you don't push against any other terminals on the computer board and upset anything. So once it's lined up, you'll feel that the resistance is different, and then you'll push on the computer board itself. Don't push on any of the electrical connections. Push that in, and then now you're ready to install the PCM cage back on the PCM. So these cords are designed to take the pressure that's going to receive when this cord is pushed back on here. And the reason you want to do it this way is so that the PCM and the computer chip don't have the chance to move around. Moving around will cause it to malfunction and make your truck shut down and possibly burn up your ECU. So I don't recommend cutting a hole in it like the previous owner of this truck did. Okay, so now you're going to want to put the fuse panel cover back on. And keep in mind this fuse panel cover has a curved detent right here, and you want to line that up with the dash before putting the bolts on. And once lined up, it goes in pretty smooth. You want to come over and then push in these pins and do all 4 corners, and you'll be good to go. So for reinstalling the PCM with the TS chip installed on it, you want to be careful with this wire when installing it back in. So you want to slide it in at an angle at first to get it started on the gasket that is on the firewall itself. So be cautious of that. Slide it into its position, line up the gasket, and then push it forward. And then push back. Now reinstall the 7mm bolts. So now that we have the ECU reinstalled on the inside of the cab, we're going to come to the outside of the cab here inside the engine bay and then take the ECU plug right here and then reinstall it into the ECU. Keep in mind this has a 10mm bolt that's sticking up out of it, so you want to be cautious with that when installing it back into the PCM. So while we have the battery cables off, I'm going to take this time to take a wire brush and clean the terminal off to make sure that it has a really good connection. Okay, so for the opposite side terminals, give it a look, make sure the terminals are clean on this side. We have no battery corrosion. Gonna go ahead and still take the wire brush, just make sure I'm getting a good connection, and do the bottom side and reinstall it here. Give it a decent tap down and tighten up the battery cable. We should be ready to start the truck. So for the first time starting the truck with the chip installed in the truck, you want to make sure that you are turned to the farthest left position. This is the stock position on this chip. Your chips may be tuned a little differently, but most of them are tuned with the stock position on the left. And she fires right up. My second position should be high idle. RPMs raised. Okay, so that's going to conclude today's vlog, our install of the 2003 Ford F350 TS Performance chip with a custom Swamps tune. So if you like today's content, please like and subscribe. And until next time, go out and make life epic.